Welcome, everybody, to the Temple Mount first open video podcast, whatever, where we'll just all go on video and have discussions about various things. But I'm going to open this one up with an interview of Krimson Raven, and we'll get into the topics in a minute. But if you're listening to this, join the Temple Mount Discord server, and please like, follow, and subscribe to YouTube, BitChute, and SoundCloud, all of which you can find on the Temple Mount podcast channel and the Temple Mount Discord server. That being said, welcome, Krimson, and everybody. How are you, my friend?
Good, wonderful. How are you?
I'm great. I just worked a 72-hour work week, and I just got home. So tomorrow's my day off, and therefore this is the best day of my week. So, and I'm happy that we're going to have this conversation. I know you don't have any idea what we're going to talk about or whatever, which is fine. But I have sort of a direction of thought. So first of all, if you can remember, like a few years ago, like where did you think American society was going to go based on your perspective? If you can remember it, like, and what I'm getting at is like, did you think that it was going to go in a different way than it did? In other words,
well, like pre-COVID, the further back you go, the more you didn't see it coming, right? But then realistically, we already kind of knew that everything that's happened over the last few years was going to happen all the way since 2011, right? Like the Rockefeller lockstep document, right? Happened in 2011, and it seems like it's been like just a perpetual plan going forward to basically enact this giant fake pandemic to basically regulate people, sign them up for experimental gene therapy, and essentially just get everybody to bow down to the government. But I do think that times are changing now. I think we're on the swing out of it. And I think that will start to snowball as more news becomes relevant, especially regarding the negative effects of, the vaccines and whatnot.
mm-hmm.
But quite a few years ago, like I definitely didn't see everything coming. I felt like I was not informed enough. Looking back now, all that information was there. Like anybody who was doing sophisticated analysis based on like predictive, like timelines or what was going to happen, it all clearly happened exactly like it was all drawn out, abundantly clear looking back at the documentation.
So were you one of the people who, supported Trump or thought that Trump was going to, do something like drain the swamp and that kind of thing at that time?
I personally thought that if it would happen, like I don't really 100% believe in anything really, but like I never much of a Trump supporter, but like if you look at what our alternative choices were, you got to pick a horse to win a race, right? And I was hoping that all of these conspiracy theories were true, all of these hundreds of thousands of sealed indictments and all of these high profile politicians and CEOs all going to jail would have been, I think, overall fantastic for everyone in the world that isn't rich and powerful. But it doesn't really necessarily look like that is what happened. It could still be happening. There are a lot of fishy things. Like there's been all these like CEOs of companies and like celebrities and like just big name politicians that have all stepped down from their positions, especially regarding what's been going on with like Jeffrey Epstein and the Maxwell trial. So it seems that like these events that these people are all interconnected to, as like one topples, another one does, and another one. I don't know if necessarily they're going to be punished for whatever crimes they've committed, but it's very clear that they don't want to be in the spotlight anymore. Many of these CEOs and really rich and powerful people have all stepped down from their positions.
So that was part of what I was curious about, is like the idea of the sealed indictments. And I think there was also sort of an idea there was going to be like a military coup or something like that. Like there was going to be like a change in government. Like Saigo also believed that, I think a lot of Americans believed that there was going to be some kind of dramatic, reversal to like an older political system or something like that, right? Like Didn't you something along those lines?
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is the idea that the original Republic of the United States of America was going to rise back again against the corporation of the United States.
Right.
I do think that it's possible that this thing is something that's still happening, but it's definitely not happening on the timeline that all these other people predicted.
Right.
Definitely not.
So, okay. And that's just one part of what I was wanting to get into. But like, do you think that there is still some benevolent faction at play, and someone's mic is staticking, I think. But you know what I mean? Like, or do you feel that recent events have kind of changed your expectations about?
I think you deceived.
Hey, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll go back.
Yeah, so I was just saying, like, do you still feel like there's some kind of positive revolutionary event in the works, or do you no longer feel that way at this time?
I do think that we're in for a big change. I do think that ultimately things are going to get a little bit worse before they get better, especially because I do feel that the stock market collapse is just around the corner. I do believe the housing bubble is also going to collapse along with that. And then I do think that in a banking system or currency reset or a jubilee or whatever you want to call it, I think is an inevitable circumstance. I think it's something that we cannot continue to move forward without it happening. And I think that everybody is aware of that, even like these politicians. That's why they're like a lot of these like really influential rich people are pushing the idea of like the great reset, right? Like you're gonna own nothing, you're gonna be happy, and like everything's gonna be owned by like a small handful of people, and you're just gonna have no personal rights or to property or probably a lot of other things. And I think that COVID really was their way to try and push a lot of these measures on us and kind of open the door with like things that were just inconveniences that eventually would completely yield to us yielding our complete rights and sovereignty, uh, and not only in a paper, because we already aren't sovereign or free at all, right? Because we all have birth certificates, we're all wards of the state. So on paper we're not free, but we feel free. Whereas in the future, what I believe that the negative forces involved want is that not only are we not free on paper, but we are dead to rights on paper, and we are completely don't feel free either.
So you're talking about the Great Reset, and it's coming social neo-socialist dystopia or something. Is that kind of accurate? Like,
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, that's probably a good way to describe it. Like, I do think that there is a possibility that there is a small faction of good people that are fighting to go against this. Even people in general, with all these mass protests, especially against government, there have like, although we live in like North America, right? There isn't really big changes here. Everything is just like blah blah blah, COVID, boosters, wham wham, my kid died, right? Like that's what we get here. But in other countries, right, like it's pretty wild right now. Like you got the Russia Ukraine conflict, you got the fucking China Taiwan thing, you got fucking the Khazarian fucking government being completely toppled by fucking people who didn't want to fucking, they basically made it so that they could not access their bank accounts unless they had the vaccine. And the people lost it. Like what they were like, this is the last straw. And then a whole bunch of people who had weapons all lost it at the same time. And all of their politicians like were fucking they what's it called when you flee a country?
refugees.
Yeah, whatever they just whatever it's called. They just completely just scattered like cockroaches. Right, there's crazy things happening all over the world. It's just in North America we're just like, they got the programming here down so much that the only thing we care about is the COVID narrative.
Yeah, that's certainly dominating the story, and there's definitely a lot going on. And of course, we want to talk about the Russia-Ukraine situation, many other things, but there's a few other things I wanted to get into instead at this point. Um, Okay, so who is Ashiana Dean? And so
So
as far as that, this is
the
a change of subject, but I want to talk about
the
Ashiana.
real the realistic unbiased answer is that Ashiana Dean is the leader of a cult or a new age religion that believes in some very wild ideas that sound extremely extravagant and really have become, honestly, I would say a foundation of most of the new age beliefs now, which is very what I find, like, looking back. I used to really find that information interesting, but looking back on it now, it's like if you try to find any of this information prior to her, it's just non-existent, right? So it's like either she's a prophet or she's full of shit, right? Like, I do think that there is relevant information even in bullshit. I think that, like, even bullshit is built on food. It was food before it became shit, right? So I think everything is valuable. But yeah, she is quite a character, and she's like another one of those Corey Goods, right? She's got a absolutely unreal new age sci-fi story, and it sounds so interesting that it's like, and you don't know if it's true, you don't know if it's not true, and it sounds so interesting that it's like you go, man, this must be true because it's so wild. And I
So
feel like a lot of people get on that boat.
that's a good introduction to Ashiana Dean as a person, but putting belief or disbelief aside, what can you tell us about what she actually claims? Like, what are her actual core beliefs or teachings?
So basically, her narrative is that we are a, like, genetic hybridization program by extraterrestrials, which does honestly sound like a probably pretty true. Uh, but when it starts to get extravagant is it's like she breaks down all these different races. She says that, like, our race is 950 billion years old, right? Where mainstream science says that we haven't lived, like we're not older than 14 billion years or whatever, which her like work around that is the idea that we came from a different universe and we destroyed our planet there, and as a result all of our souls basically level down, right? Like, you imagine, like, in a game where you die and you lose experience, but you can make that experience up, right? Like, you're not dead forever, you respawn. That's basically kind of like what her premise is, and we're here trying to solve the issues between the interconnections of our consciousness, how we relate to one another, and essentially, like, the the good, the light, and the dark forces, right? We're trying to not repeat the same mistakes because apparently, according to her information, this is pretty much our last chance, right? We already fucked it up twice. We already destroyed two other planets, and this is pretty much our third strike before we become space dust. I believe that's what she says.
It's our final chance before we become space dust. Is that the last thing you said?
Yeah, so, like, in her narrative, she says that basically we go through, like, this process of ascension, right? Like, in the new age kind of thing, we've kind of probably all heard of the idea of ascension. But when a collective race fucks up too much, we actually, like, descend as, like, a punishment, and we get the opportunity to go through the process that we've already been through to ascend into that higher dimension again and populate, like, a new higher dimensional world. But what we've done is we've descended down into a lower octave universe. It's more dense, less possibility. You know, we're like a the more inferior patch where we got a whole bunch of upgrades, and it's like we're pretty much just here just trying to figure it out while extraterrestrials have been messing with us, breeding us with other genetic programs over thousands of years. And it seems like what the narrative is that humans seem to have been engineered to be some sort of super race. Like, our potential is, like, insanely high, but our actualization of that potential is kind of piss poor.
Right. And a lot of those general principles or ideas, I think many of us and myself agree with, or at least are sympathetic to. Um, So we're going to just jump through a few more questions, then we'll open it up for the audience participation. Along the same lines, what can you tell me about Corey Goode?
So Corey Goode is another one of these New Age prophets, right? So Corey Goode's narrative is that he was a secret space program insider who spent 20 years in the secret space program as part of something called, I think, Operation Solar Warden, which is supposed to be some sort of stellar defense initiative to keep our solar system basically like police against extraterrestrial. And then he said that after serving 20 years, he was discharged. He was age regressed using advanced technology to make him younger. And then he was basically just dropped back off on Earth and was like, well, thank you for your service, sir. And then he decided to become a whistleblower. And that's pretty much his whole thing. And then he met David Wilcock, right? And then David Wilcock kind of blew him up with like cosmic disclosure, where again they talk about very extravagant, very almost unheard of things concerning extraterrestrials. And there are there's that other guy too, the guy who used to do the autopsies. Like his name escapes me right now, but he attested that he was a scientist who was doing autopsies on basically extraterrestrials. But I have quite a lot of negative information about that guy's credibility as well too. But it is definitely, they have very interesting stories.
So you mentioned David Wilcock, but please give me any intel that you have on him, if you want to put it that way. Intelligence you can give me on David Wilcock.
Oh, from my analysis, David Wilcock is interesting. So he's kind of very much like the people in this group, right? He does a lot of research in UFOs and technology, spirituality, and ancient teachings, ancient civilizations, just like we all do. And he's really kind of just put himself as, the pillar of somebody who possesses all this knowledge and can teach it to people who don't know it, right? For a price, obviously. But he, I don't know. I think he's done a lot of good things. To be honest, I think he's done more good than he has bad. I just kind of think that some of the people he associates himself with, like, I think we really could use a little bit more proof on their credibility and their stories is kind of lacking there. But he too is an interesting character. It seems that people from these secret space programs, people who like Bob Lazar, worked for Area 51, like all of these like very like secret government people kind of just come out to David Wilcock, like somehow he's like intricately just connected, or like a magnet for all these people and whistleblowers that just want to, put stuff on blast. It's actually impressive that so many people come to him with these stories, right? Like even like William Tompkins and stuff, right? Like there was so much information about that guy and what he did during his service.
Right. So you have all these people: David Wilcock, Corey Goode, Bob Lazar, or Stephen Greer, I guess we could mention. I mean, what do you believe is true in terms of this whole scenarios that they all portray? Like, putting aside their individual credibility, what do you personally believe is the case about these scenarios?
What is true? I do think that there is a secret space program. I think that we can't really determine how widespread or advanced it is. There is really no concrete proof other than a whole bunch of testimonies from a handful of people. I do fully believe that what we are here is an alien extraterrestrial hybridization program, basically to combine genetic material for whatever end goal or cause that is. I do feel that is also ultimately true. I do think that there are other dimensions and other universes that are imperceivable to us, and I think that the top, like the high end of the reality of the situation is like, I know that some people, especially like NSA, will talk about like these extraterrestrials that are physical beings with physical ships, And I think that those do exist, but I think that the ultimate reality of, you know, what's in control of everything that's going on are fundamentally like interdimensional, like super intelligent beings that are on a whole other plane of existence than we are. Like they're completely imperceivable to us unless they want to be perceived. And they kind of just have like almost like an administrator level privilege over, you know, what's going on here, especially when it comes to the what is really pulling the strings of the physical extraterrestrials. I ultimately think it is like something much more advanced than we're really fully able to comprehend.
Well, they do have a subreddit called Out There, and in Out There, they refer to them as the developers of Earth. And I believe this subreddit is a communications method for them to play around with people.
Yeah, I do definitely believe in that, as well as the idea that the Earth was is like an experiment or a project. It is something that, like, I don't think we came here of our own volition. I don't think that we just evolved from monkeys and all of a sudden, you know, started like melting metals and creating weapons. Like I really feel that we were genetically bred, and that ultimately led us to where we're at now. Like we're at a level of technological prowess that we probably would not have ever achieved if it wouldn't have been for the help of extraterrestrials, whether it be through direct sharing of technology or even just the injecting of thoughts and ideas into the mind. Like for example, like Nikola Tesla, in some of the things that he wrote, he attests that, you know, he was in communication with these kinds of like beings that were giving him information, that were like giving him ideas. And when he would get stuck, he would go and he would like do like rituals and meditate, and essentially they would answer his questions, right? And he was basically being pushed and guided by some sort of non corporeal force. That, and I do think that these higher dimensional entities do have that ability to interface with us, influence us, tell us things, you know, as long as it's within their right to do so.
Yeah, but for every one Tesla and John Nash that we get 100,000 schizophrenics dying in a state hospital.
Yeah, it's definitely not a process that is efficient or works very well, right? Like, and then you have obviously there's a, like, especially like from a new age perspective, right? Like there is like the negative alien agenda, right? The NAA, and then you do have like benevolent ET races, and then you have like neutral ET races. So you basically have people that are like watchers, right? Then you have like angels, right? Messengers. And then you have demons, which are negative extraterrestrials.
See, I want to believe in the good, but I think it's just the one race, and I think they're mimicking and playing all the other races to distract us and keep us distracted. You know how we have all the world religions and all the gods that are in all those religions? I think it's the same thing. I think it's just them fucking around with our heads, just and in that interaction they have with us. Like I'll hear UFO discussions and contact scenarios where the alien comes into their home with a hologram and says, you know, tell me about your species, like what's going on, and they already know all these questions. Like they're just coming to these people to study and see what the reaction would be. I think I think there's a lot more to it. And there's that psychologist that he did like 140 different abduction cases, and he did psychoanalysis of them with these abduction cases and wrote a book about it. And there's a common theme in all of them, about some like negative worldly agenda going on. Now, I don't know if that's him being fed those specific people and those stories of brainwashing that those people had to then make that book, or if that's all real. Like they're so intelligent that they have like uh, cover stories for everything. You know what I mean? Like they have ways around of distracting and disinformation around all of the stories. They're even, you know, all the spiritual groups and everything else. Like they create little disinformation projects within each of them just to mind fuck you.
Yeah, I agree. I think we live in a time now, and especially as more time passes, you know, from where I was a few years ago to where I am now, the more it just comes to that we can't really determine what is the truth, right? Like, especially when we're talking about things regarding stuff that is like top secret or like, majestic level like information. Like we're not gonna get like, oh, this FIO doc or this Freedom of Information Act document says like this, and this is like concrete. We're just not gonna get these kinds of things, right? So it's like we depend on people who are whistleblowers to be truthful, right? And we just have to accept them in good faith or figure out that they're full of shit, right?
I was going to say that's the problem, though. Those Majestic guys have a lot of money funding disinformation. Like a lot of what the UFO community is about is disinformation through UFO Jesuses like Wilcock, Corey Goode, Greer, and even Dolan. Even though he's a little more serious about things, I follow a lot of those guys, and each one of them has like a percentage of what seems to be true and what seems to be disinformation because everything is so fantastically wild. Emery Smith is another one, fantastical wild stories. Like I believe a lot of these people are heavily surrounded with counterintelligence, and in counterintelligence, they're saying is there is no truth. So their stories come up at fucking all over the place about all kinds of stuff, like the age regression stuff from Corey Goode, a lot of the psychic stuff from Wilcock, and the raw stuff, and the Law of One, and like I think it's part of this one big Project Majestic, and we have parapsychologists around the world. There's a parapsychology group with Help Put Off and a bunch of others. There's a doctorate program at Berkeley and a man named Jeffrey Mishlove. Guys like Russell Targ that did all the psychic spy research, and parapsychology is focused around getting philosophers and people that are involved in these research basically around spirituality from the ancient histories so that they can be turned into an ontology to use it to the public and create this narrative from ancient history. Like they're putting a lot of money into it, and a lot of researchers, a lot of psychologists into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like one thing that does irk me about like especially Corey Goode and David Wilcock, right, is like the majority of the basis of everything that they talk about is essentially just based on the Law of One and Corey Goode's testimony, right? And we have no evidence of Corey Goode's testimony, and the Law of One was in 1979, right? Like it's not like it's new information. They're just kind of piggybacking on it. It's like the same thing with like what's her name, Lisa Renee, as the person who does the Ascension glossary, which has again a bunch of really crazy wild information. But most of all of Lisa Renee's information is all just based off of Ashiana Dean's narrative. And it's like you said something about like, try to make these people into space Jesuses. The realistic thing is that all of these people aren't even remotely close to that. The only person who even fits in that category is Ashiana Dean, because her narrative is nothing we've ever heard before. It is detailing events of the past, the present, and the future that have never ever been heard before at a level of sci-fi that is never been done before. Like she's the only one that fits a space Jesus thing. And like if you've ever watched like any times where she's talking, she believes whatever she's saying so genuinely, and she remembers. Like she's just like Corey Goode in that way, is they don't slip up in their narrative or their story, right? And usually when people don't make mistakes when they're describing their stories or narratives is because either it's true or they have diligently made sure and rehearsed, or they believe fully that it's true.
Well, but that's why you got to do some research on counterintelligence and how deeply these people go into it. They spend decades researching and training and creating the narratives that they do. If what I believe is that they're working with extraterrestrials to do this, they have ability to further enhance their memory about these things by creating very advanced projections to these people that they're doing it to. So while Corey Goode might think it's like he was shown something and that's what he has to explain, but it's so in his memory from the way that the technology works to give people visions that the visions of our prophets of the past. God gave me a vision. So they're giving these people visions. I believe on drugs, because that's really, as far as I'm concerned, the only way it really works when they're on a type of chemical. So they're giving them advanced visions on it, and then they're training themselves on the story to then be able to relay. And that's why it sounds so real from some of these people, because they're really good at it. Like they have a really good short-term memory, and they're really good at explaining the things that they've interacted.
Well, the thing is, in Corey Goode's case specifically, his story does not seem like some sort of vision. Like he was in his living room with his dog, and a giant extraterrestrial that was like half physical, half non-physical appeared, took him out into his backyard into a small scout ship, and flew his ass somewhere.
But that's the story that he's
But like
supposed
this
to say. I've heard that too, by the way. I've heard
it's not a vision, right? It's not like he closed his eyes and was meditating and was shown like some sort of crazy vision.
No, that's what I mean. That's how the visions work. It's like a movie.
It's real.
The visions are like a movie. It's literally like a movie playing out. Like they've shown me an image. They showed me a vision of in Antarctica. They're in Antarctica, and they get in this little thing, and then they go down this big elevator shaft, like huge. It's like a giant underground base. And they get in this triangle-looking spacecraft, and then there's two human pilots, one alien with like a long, elongated conal head with a little thing over it, and you get in this craft, and then they start flying over Earth, coming over to me. And so they've shown me a vision, like full-on movie-like visions of that to the augmented vision technology that they're able to do. So I think they're giving him a narrative through this technology in some way.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Anyone in the audience is free to talk now, so it's an open discussion. I didn't want to interrupt because you guys were going back and forth, but if anyone wants to speak, please feel free.
Yeah, so a lot of these names you've said, Krimson and Shogun. I'm wondering, like, because I guess if you know anything about To the Stars of Arts and Science, Tom DeLonge's kind of like his own, in a way, it's kind of its own like media and like aerospace program. I'm just curious to hear what are your thoughts, and what do you think like his kind of way of disclosure is feasible, or like just clear enough for people to understand? I don't know if you read any of his works, or if you know what I'm talking about per se, but I'm just curious to see what you have to offer to say towards the topic.
Yeah, I personally actually don't know anything about Tom DeLonge or his To the Stars thing. I do know that it is some sort of like organization that was started to push for proof and information based on extraterrestrial disclosure. And I think that ultimately it's a great thing. I think that the more people that start demanding it, just like right now, we have in Canada like 32,000 truckers that are all protesting outside the Parliament building to basically fight against vaccine mandates. And as a result of this, it's going to cause a huge like chink inside of the supply chain. And a lot of people don't want this to happen, right? And if if they get more traction, more people, it'll be like a snowball effect. So I do think that actions that these people commit and the work that they do ultimately will yield the goal. Like the more people who push for extraterrestrial disclosure, the sooner we're going to get it. But it's just like, this is a thing that although everyone in this Discord wants this so bad, like it's in our top like 5 things that we want in life, I do think that the majority of the population isn't even thinking about it. I think that the majority of people don't look at things like UFOs or extraterrestrials as reality, because a lot of people like are indoctrinated into belief systems that isn't the main focus, right? Like we're all at a point where we're so woke that we realize that this is some sort of ET hybridization program that was like engineered thousands of years ago by like these higher order like Anunnaki entities. So, and that's not even to say that they created us. They're just the last people to fuck with our genetics that we know about. Technically, actually, Moderna and Pfizer are the last people to fuck with our genetics that we know about. But I do think it's good overall. I think that Tom DeLonge, just like Stephen Greer, right? Stephen Greer is another person who's trying to push it. I think that ultimately a lot of these people, when they get enough attention, they probably get eyes on them, and they probably get controlled too, right? Like, I know Stephen Greer knows more than what he says. It's very obvious, but he seems like he's almost like not allowed to say it, and it seems like that too with Corey Goode, David Wilcock. The reason why they're around and they're famous is because they say what they're allowed to say, and they don't say what they're not allowed to say, right?
So, what is your take on the credibility of Stephen Greer overall?
I think that out of all of the people, Stephen Greer is one of the most credible people when it comes to extraterrestrials. I also wholeheartly agree with his position that the majority of extraterrestrials are benevolent in nature. But it's the benevolent ones have to follow rules and laws where they're not allowed to interfere with our development, whereas the negative extraterrestrials, they don't give a fuck, and then they push basically like the boundaries that they have some sort of right or claim to us because of their direct involvement in the genetic hybridization program. And then that's why they can do what they do. They're like, well, we technically own 1/16 of the human genome, so that means that we can do this and this and that. And it's like, well, what are we gonna do? Like, how do we fight this? And like, you gotta go to a space court, dude. You think real court's hard? Try space court.
So, how do you think we can assess whether or not extraterrestrials are benevolent or malevolent? Like, why they're benevolent, or how would we know if they?
I think if they were purely malevolent, they would have never left, and they'd still be here whipping us and making us build pyramids or something, right? Like, the fact that we have the lives that we do, although our lives are heavily controlled and regulated, I think that if they were really wanted the earth for personal use, they could have taken it a long time ago.
Well, sure, but being malevolent doesn't necessarily have to mean they want to take the world or kill all of us or destroy everything. It would just mean they have to have sinister or, intentions that are hostile to humanity in some way. So, for example, just, going around traumatizing people by abducting them and inserting things in them and treating them like experimental animals by, doing all these weird experiments on them without their consent that mess them up mentally or whatever. Would still qualify as malevolent, even if they weren't trying to, destroy the whole world or whatever. Or, for example, they were just sinister, like demonic energies or something. So what I'm getting at is just like, how would we know whether they're good or evil? Because it wouldn't just come down to whether they destroy the world or take it over. Like, they could have very complex, evil conspiracy type plans that we just don't understand. But
yeah, I agree. I think that even on the other side of that coin, I think benevolent extraterrestrials could have plans that we don't really understand either.
Well, right. And I mean, I'm not saying they are hostile or that they are benevolent. I'm just wondering how we would know. Like, because all we really know about aliens, as far as I know, is that they abduct people, they put implants in people, they may hybridize with people, they seem to abduct cattle and dissect them for some reason. They may or may not have anything to do with things like crop circles, but probably don't. But on balance, that all seems pretty malevolent because it seems to come down to like treating people at most like scientific animals,
One of my favorite theories has to do with humans being used as and or other animals on Earth being used as a database where data is being stored in our genome because of the way that conventional media that we would use, that we're used to, all of that eventually will decay. It will not last as long as something like a self-perpetuating life form. And there's also one other guy, I don't know if you mentioned him or not, but he's really interesting, talks about stuff like this. His name is Michael Sarion. I believe he's from Ireland. But he has a lot of fascinating lectures and stuff that I really have enjoyed.
Yeah, Michael Sarion he's half Indian, half Irish, and he does a lot of what, like the Lemuria discussions, Avalon, and all the ancient histories. a lot of ancient poet stuff and psychology. He's really good. If anybody doesn't listen to him, I really recommend him too. He delves deep into the esoteric. He's a very deep thinker, but he sometimes goes a little wild with the Tiamat concepts and the 10th planet and some other stuff. But a lot of what he does research is from things he finds, like old texts and things like that. He's not like he's not doing this from visions type stuff. So he's not like counterintelligence, but he could be. You never know.
Yeah, he's a researcher, and he's like someone who makes documentaries, basically. Like, there's actually tons of stuff he's put out, but a lot of it just isn't popular or gets like, just like shadow banned. Like he's probably one of the more occult figures that, like, most people, even people who are interested in all this stuff, they're like, who the hell is Michael Sarion? Like, because I know I was like that just a few years ago.
Yeah, like he links in a lot of the occult to the cover up, and he kind of goes deep on it. And a lot of what he talks about is heavily based in basically like a global trauma. He equates humanity as being a traumatized species because of the flood and things that have been happening throughout our human history. And it's really, really interesting stuff the way he frames it. But he definitely outs a lot of the Luciferians of the world and the occultists of the world as to what they interact with and how they interact with it through symbology, psychiatry, and the demonology and where this all comes from. There's another guy that's not as good as him because he gets a little wacky for me, but Mark Passiow is an ex-Church of Satan priest, and he has some good discussions on demystifying the occult.
Ralph, can you add anything to the that description of Michael Sarion and what he talked about? Like what?
Sure. Yeah. He. And NSA described very well. Obviously, he's quite familiar, but he takes a lot of the old scriptures and writings and myths and things, and he finds a lot of good parallels there. He delves more deeply than anyone I've ever seen into the Celtic mythology. I mean, his knowledgeability on anything related to the Celtic myths or the history of Ireland or anything like that is he knows his shit. He was the first person that introduced me to the idea that Ireland was not settled from its eastern shore to its western shore, but rather the first settlers arrived on its western shore, which was the farthest shore from any other land. But he theorizes that when there was a land bridge there, that people were able to get there that way, but that's part of what he talks about too, is the idea that there was once much less water on the earth, and so a lot of places that are now isolated were once connected, and it explains a lot of things, both the flood and also why there was trade between places at one time that now they don't seem like they could. Like there's cocaine and Egyptian mummies and things, and there's Egyptian style mummies found in Ireland, and that's the other big thing that I love that he talks about, which I have found echoed in a almost 200-year-old history book of Ireland. It talks about how the people who first settled Ireland, a lot of them were coming from what we now know as Egypt, and that the Irish language, the Gaelic language, is the closest modern thing that we have to the way that they spoke.
It's really trippy.
Queen Skoda from Egypt.
What's trippy about that, Ralph, is I have Irish descent, like Irish genetics, and the weird thing in my DNA is I have a tiny amount of Coptic Egyptian DNA. And I was like, why do I have Coptic Egyptian mixed in with like Irish and Scottish? And that might explain it, I guess.
Yeah, it seems that we definitely haven't got like the whole story of what's happened. Because it is strange. Egyptian relics are found in multiple different places around the world where they shouldn't be. Like they even found like Egyptian statues and artifacts like in the Grand Canyon.
There's like Seat of Lives in Cambodia. There's all kinds of stuff in Cambodia. But Sarion's thing on Ireland, so like the water level 25,000 years ago, the Younger Dryas event was like 200 feet lower, and so there's tons of cities and shit that are like out of the sea, even around Japan and shit like that. There's all kinds of underground ruins and underwater ruins. So like the borders that we know of around these countries was like way different back in the day, like way the fuck different. And like the ages of things in Ireland, like I think it's way older than they want to admit. Like they're finding a guy, a 9,000-year-old corpse in a cave, and they found his relative today. That's like still in England, like you know, like.
Yeah, what a lot of people I think don't realize is like, a lot of people know the flood happened, but I don't think they quite realize just how catastrophic of an event it was. Like there was like globally like over 400 feet of more sea level and water that came from who knows where. And then on top of that, the whatever celestial event or magnetic pole reversal or whatever happened completely shook everything up to the point that anything that was built and existed before became immediately buried under bajillions of pounds of dirt, mud, and water. You can even see, if anybody's researched stuff about like Tartaria, a lot of these old buildings that are around in Russia and even in in England and in Britain, they're built on top of old building, and there's like 10-20 feet of just like dirt that it now covers these old buildings, and they built the buildings that now exist there on top of those foundations. So it's just like a lot of dirt and a lot of water just fucked everything up.
Well, there's the things like in the lemurs. That's why they called it Lemuria, because lemurs they're on that island only, and then like it's like how'd they get there?
Sarion talked a lot about the Bible, and he talks a lot about Genesis, and he has some theories about maybe an Atlantean type society is what's being described there. But he also talks about the cause of the flood. Now, there's an asteroid belt that's made up of iron and ice, ice. Mostly it's pretty much. And a lot of those pieces, there's other trace things there too, but a lot of those pieces end up coming to Earth as meteors still. But imagine if, during human history at some time, there was a watery planet there that exploded for some reason, another body collided with it or whatever. It would definitely explain a lot. It would explain things that were described having happened in the heavens, and it would explain a connected flood. If there was suddenly, I mean, if we're still getting little pieces now, imagine right after a blast, tens of thousands of years ago.
Some of those comets, are huge.
Torrential floods. Sorry, go ahead.
And that,
sorry,
that
I
is
thought you were done. Sorry, I was saying some of the comets that are going out that are around, like Halley's comets, they're huge. Like they have a lot of water on it.
And what you said about there being like another water planet that was like could have been destroyed and could be the asteroid belt now, like that's basically what the Sumerian narrative is, right? Like if you look at the epic and the story of like the conflict that they had between like Anu and Tiamat, Kingu and Marduk. Essentially, Tiamat was their mother, which was like the mother like waters. And if you look at it like physically, all of these different characters in the story in the epic can be assigned to the different planets that are in the sky. Just like most religions, surprisingly, all kind of fit that bill. Is that each of their deities are represented by one of the stellar archons or the planet. So it's interesting that you said that.
This is all really, really interesting discussion, but I wanted to ask you guys specifically all about how you feel about 2021 and all the disclosure stuff that came out in 2021 from the government creating, the Congressional Inquisition into UFOs, the Pentagon opening a UFO division, the Tic Tac videos, all the different stuff. Like, what do you think about the state of disclosure starting 2022?
Honestly, I think that it's pretty lackluster. Like, I was expecting more. Like, I'd like to see us be at a position where we're gonna make like public first contact by now. Like, geez, like what's taking so long? Like, what we've got is just kind of like spoon-fed stuff that most people into ufology is like the videos that they released about UFOs. We already saw them like fucking 10 years ago. The same videos that they publicly release. So I don't know. I really don't think that. I think they're making steps towards the end goal of a bigger public disclosure, especially with things like the Space Force and them naming the first division of the Space Force the Guardians, right? Like, that is something that was either completely engineered to fuck with New Agers, or maybe the idea that there are these guardian races maybe is not quite that ridiculous. I do think that eventually we're going to move to a big, public world disclosure and a first contact. But I honestly think it's going to take quite a few more years. I think that they're so much more concerned about running out of resources and how they're going to acquire enough power to keep everybody going than they are with aliens. Like, it really seems that the world leaders don't want to meet the terms of the aliens that want to help. It seems that they'd rather work with the malevolent aliens to remain in power, whereas like the benevolent aliens, ultimately their main two foundational rules that they wanted to keep like Earth to accomplish was to make the steps to attaining world peace immediately and decommission every single nuclear weapon that we had. And those were the two things that were like the foundation for the benevolent extraterrestrials. And when these extraterrestrials confronted President Eisenhower about it, literally he was like, he thought they were Russian spies and told them to get the fuck out of the White House. And they were like, all right, see you later, dude. Like, you know what we
See,
said.
I think it's a little more complicated than that. I think they're a very mathematical, statistical based species with advanced technologies to analyze data. And I think what they're doing is using statistics to judge humanity. I think they're using a bell curve, if you will, on humanity. They're analyzing our crime. They're very interested in our crime. They're very interested in our sex lives. They're very interested in terror. They're very interested in being able to create these things and see what people can be pushed to do. I think they're very much analyzing. They're using. They have like a structure of control with certain groups already on the planet and certain guilds and cults and religions and whatever you want to call it. But I think at the lower level, they're pushing a lot of things along just to see what humanity can take. Like, God makes problems just to see what it'll take before you do what the devil pleases, kind of thing. And I think that they have been playing lesson teacher to people and on an individual level, a country level, and a planet level. And I think they are advanced enough to do all these things simultaneously if they wanted to. And so I think they're interacting with many different people, many different prophets, many different groups, many different events, just to see what the reaction from said events would be. I just don't believe that some kid hearing demons is going to go shoot up a school and kill 17 children. And I think that these things, or at least some along those lines, are being instigated. There's a 2-star general who started thinking everybody was out to get him at the Pentagon, and he ended up getting diagnosed with bipolar, and he had to be retired under Dempsey after 9/11. So there's like little idiosyncrasies of influence and interaction just to see what humans can take. And I think they're analyzing this on a global scale, but obviously America is as Saddam Hussein called it, the Great Satan. But this is all allegory that you can call conspiracy at this point.
So, Krimson, if I could ask you another question, like, to what extent do you feel that you are receiving connections and information and communication with, like, extraterrestrials and stuff currently, past?
Currently, everything seems to have kind of really slowed down. I have not really received anything mind-boggling, monumentous, or anything like that. Any extreme revelations or none of that recently. But in the past, I feel like I have had a lot of different interdimensional and extraterrestrial experiences that are very very hard to explain. Like and really, what all of those things have taught me is that none of us have any idea what the fuck is really going on, and that I think that it's actually so complicated that we can't even begin to imagine the actual ramifications of the influence of extraterrestrial and interdimensional entities have over us, what their motives really are, and what the hierarchy is of not only the physical extraterrestrials but also the non-corporeal intelligences. Like, I think that, yeah.
Well, I was having this thought today. Like, for example, our NSA could release all the data on the names and addresses on everybody that's invested in the central banking system, from the Federal Reserve to all the other nations, and all the information around who actually has the money and where and what's going down. And if that was public information, see, we can't release that because it would cause problems, because there's so many people angry at the people that have money, but we don't even know where it is because it's in hedge funds. It's in private investments from like the families like the Warburgs and things like that. So we don't even know. And these families who own the Federal Reserve, these groups, you can call them families, but these hedge funds and these massive money groups own the American military, because the American military has to get a paper signed every year that gives them $800 billion. And so the military can't do anything against them or against the system, because then the money system locks up and they'll fuck everything up. So they can't build their fucking submarines and shit. So they're tied at the hip with the military industrial complex, and the military industrial complex is at the hip with not just America, but our allies. Certain allies are more allies than the others, and so forth. And so it's like this giant web, and they all relate to the CFR, the Trilateral, the Bilderberg, and everything else. And you can go look up the names of those people, but you can't look up the names of the people and where the actual money is. So the money story on Earth is still hidden from the public. The Panama Papers and the Pandora Papers kind of gave you a glimpse at that, but the real truth is who has all the money. There's $264 trillion in debt on Earth. Somebody owns that debt. Elon Musk is not the richest man in the world. Bill Gates is not the richest man in the world. There's trillionaires out there. The WWF was from $1 trillion donation from the Rothschilds for the United Nations. Like there's they were able to generate that much funds to give to them. But nobody wants to discuss that. I guess everybody's scared or something. They think they're satanic kid fuckers. I don't know. Like, there's something going on that has created this narrative that they're somehow untouchable, or at least unviewable. They say or they call you racist or something, or because like there's Saudi Arabian money, there's American money, there's multiple world orders, there's Chinese money, there's Japanese money, but who has all that money? And what are they specifically doing with it? And why can't we see that publicly if they're investing in systems that control certain nations? It's crazy right now.
Well, I think that if a lot of that information had like full transparency, it wouldn't be too hard for people who are determined investigators to piece together a good court case against almost anybody on the face of the planet. The reason why it's a secret is because people who do bad shit don't want people to know about it, dude. And people who are
I know why it's secret.
Please don't interrupt me. And people who are rich and powerful don't want to be known, right? Like, there are way more powerful and rich people than the people we're told about. Like, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are nothing. Like, who do you think is the CEO of fucking BlackRock Holdings, dude?
BlackRock has amassed, at the time I watched the documentary about this and the Aladdin stock trading software, they have amassed $21 trillion, right? That's 5 trillion more dollars than the entire UK's GDP.
I know, but that's only 1 year of America's GDP, though. That's not that much money compared to the total. It's a lot, but like the Vanguard Group went from 1 trillion to 4 trillion. It's probably at 7 trillion by now. You know, like there's the SKGAA group that's like a fucking, I think it's like 50, or no, not 50 trillion. It's many trillions, and it's a European fund, hedge fund. You can pull lists of all the hedge funds and look them up, but within the hedge funds, it's all privatized, and like you can't really see whose money is where and what it is. So I mean, like but see, if they were all in America, there'd be like people trying to regulate it so that people could know what's going on, at least to an extent. But because we have a lot of this international money, you know, profits from like Apple has all their money in jerseys for tax, relief and all this other stuff. Not Jersey, America, but it's really weird. And if there's a great reset, like, what's going to happen to their money?
Yeah, like the people with the most power and the most wealth are the people with the most to lose in the situation of a great reset, right? Like for all of us, it's great, but for them, it's like, we just spent like 8 generations trying to do this, and it's like we did it, and now what are they going to take it away? They're so rich and powerful. I don't think that they would let that happen. And I do think that a big part of the problem where we're at today, and what's really caused a lot of issues during our entire civilization, is the fact that these things aren't transparent, right? It is the fact that everything is hidden behind a veil of secrecy, and that there's classified information. I feel that we could get so much further ahead if just all of our collective knowledge was available to everybody. Because really what causes a lot of problems is that the eyes of the few have the most knowledge, and knowledge is power at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, like for example, the Knights of Columbus, which is a secret Catholic order that JFK was part of, has $100 billion in assets, and they deal with life insurance. So they have like $100 billion in life insurance assets. So they have like a ton of money. The Mormons have like $200 billion between the market and their assets. There's tons of money out there, and that's just like a little part of things.
Yeah, I feel that overall, even if there is going to be a great reset, I hope that whatever financial system comes in place of it, I hope is going to be more transparent. From my understanding, right, like there is this conspiracy information, or I guess conspiracy is not the best word, but I guess like occult information, that there is like a new banking system that's already been prepared for this, right? They call it the quantum financial system, and like essentially the whole premise behind that is it's basically operated by an artificial intelligence that can monitor and track every single transaction over the entire world, and record it essentially, and make sure that all of that information is available to someone. But I think ultimately, if a new system does arise from this coming collapse, that it is hopefully going to be a very transparent system, because that's how we're going to prevent bad people from doing bad things.
Yeah, it's like Hunger Games shit. Like we make movies about this stuff, but some of these people like idolize this. I hate to be Alex Jones about it with 1984, but they use that as like a fucking rule book.
Have you guys heard about this concept of Nisara and Jasara, or like spelled GESARA, and Nisara NESARA? Hugh talks about this, and there's a little bit about it online. Have you guys heard about this?
So that's the global economic what is it? Security Reformation Act, right? That's basically supposed to be some sort of global agreement towards the new financial system, and essentially opening the door for one world government basically everybody has to agree to NESARA so that they can have these rules and regulations under a national system. And then once everybody in the world agrees to NESARA, then NESARA can be enacted, and we can move towards a global civilization instead of like separated by our nations and our states.
Well, have you seen there's also the city Neom, which is like the size of New York in Saudi Arabia. And they've invested $500 billion into this so far. That's a lot of money. And they're building an entire city structured around artificial intelligence, the size of New York City in the middle of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, Neom, fascinating. It's going to have an artificial moon, a fully enclosed, like dome-like environment with total like weather control, where they can make it rain or control the lights and everything. And in the middle of the desert, they'll produce everything off flying taxis, robot police officers. It's all integrated into the Internet of Things. It's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I'll say is about NESARA and GESARA is like, like a lot of people think like something like that's just like a conspiracy, but it's like 100% like a real thing, factual, and it's been in the works for a long time, right? Like I was saying, the new financial system has already been in the works for over 30 years, and things like NESARA and GESARA, there were like presidents like I believe Bill Clinton, Obama, and even Trump, all have been part of signing documents regarding NESARA and GESARA. It's just not really publicly known, right? Because they don't talk about the shit on the news. Really, all they want to talk about is, whatever the people controlling the news, whatever narrative they want to push is all we hear about. So we don't hear about these other things that are going on, especially, and I said this earlier, I was talking to somebody else earlier, I think random guy, these government officials, they make these votes on bills for documents that have over 2,400 pages. I can guarantee you that not a single person in all of fucking the Senate or Congress and even the president did not read all 2,400 pages of the bill that they're all fucking voting on, and what's been written on every line and scrutinized. They just the amount of time they have from the time that it's talked about to when it's voted on, you just like don't have enough time when all these people have to be camera jockeys and show up and do all of their little fucking speeches to like make sure that everybody's like dangling their carrots for everyone, right?
Well, yeah, you want a real mind fuck about it. Like, so there's 5,239 think tanks in America. There's a Pennsylvania college did a study on think tanks and globally, and then the next one is like a couple of hundred. The American think tanks that feed to the politicians, they're feeding them these documents and these things to do, and you can then pull a list of every executive order the presidents have signed since whenever you want to go, like all the way back to FDR. FDR did a lot, like a whole lot, because of like World War II and what was going down, and a lot of shit had to be like executive ordered. But there are some crazy regulations that from like in Obama's administration, there's some pretty intense executive orders that got signed that have serious intense ramifications. Like one of them was he allowed the intelligence community to legally lie to the American people. So that if you're in the CIA, you can legally lie to the American people now. I can't remember the order number, but you can pull lists of all that up, and those think tanks are feeding through. Like, so there's the Council on Foreign Relations, there's CSIS, those are big ones. There's Brookings Institute. There's a bunch of colleges too. All these colleges have huge funds. So like Stanford Research Institute, that's an international think tank now, but it didn't used to be, and it's a $4 billion international think tank. And there's tons of funding going on. There's another think tanks that come through, like Obama signed in the Brain Initiative, and then you can go look through all the people that fund the Brain Initiative, and it's just all these like giant monetary groups that have collectivized their money to research, because they're all getting old and they're dying of Alzheimer's and shit, and they want to figure out how to fix that. So they're like, let's do the Brain Initiative. There's just so much shit going on. Like it's hard to understand it all, but it's all out there. Like at least a lot of it's out there. Like I said, the only thing that's not out there is who has this money and where's this money going to and from.
Like you said about executive orders is that all that information is available, but very few people will go on the official government website and read every executive order. Like has anybody here, like, when Joe Biden got elected as president into office, on his first day in office, he signed 47 executive orders that were pre-prepared on his first day. 47 executive orders that he signed, more in one day than any president in all of like history, which is insane because I don't think he knew what was on them. And I don't think any of us know what was on them. Like, I read a couple different things because I was like following a rabbit hole one day, but like there are so many executive orders and different things that are signed by the politicians. Like, an executive order is not even that bad. It's like 3, 4, 5, 6 pages sometimes. Like, they're pretty short, but like some of the shit that they're putting through the government, like 2,400 page documents, like there could be anything in there, and it'll be like, oh yeah, we voted yes on this, and then fucking 5 years from now, it'll be like, yeah, in page 3,892, subclause F, subsection B 2.1, it says that we can legally do this thing that's absolutely terrible, but we all agreed to it, right?
Yeah,
With the 2,400 page document. What?
It's all there, dude. An interesting one is the Intelligence Authorization Act 12333, signed by Reagan. That one's a fucking really weird one. The Patriot Act is still really fucking weird. Like, the fact that the Patriot Act is still active is really fucked up. We have no rights under that. There's Section 702 at the NSA that allows them to just blanket collect anything they want. Our FISA laws are totally corrupt and fucked up. You can pull a list of every judge that's a FISA warrant judge, but you can't see anything about what they're approving and who they're approving it to, because national security. It's all to protect America.
I think ultimately, like, at the end of the day, we do have to remain positive, though. Like, there's so many negative things. Like, we definitely do have to hope that there is a benevolent force that is ultimately fighting for us too, right? Because it does suck that, all these people that are involved in these secret societies and clubs and groups and cults, they all seem to work together and they don't rat on each other, and it's very shitty. But I do believe that we're at an age in the awakening. We've come so far in it now that I think that a large percentage of the population now is becoming aware of these things going on, especially people who are within the government, right? And I think that there are more good people than there are bad people, and really what it's just going to take is it's going to just take like some sort of wave of collective revelation to cause like a really big shakeup with everybody. Like I said, like the biggest thing that's going to happen right now, like we're going, some of us are all feeling it already, but like, is the supply chain attack, right? So all of our stores or grocery stores and shit are like all empty because shit can't get anywhere. And then after that, we're probably going to see like the financial collapse, right? The stock market. I don't know about you, but I'm down $1,700 in the stock market. I'm not happy about it. But every stock is down, not just what I've invested in. Everything is down. The other day, who was it? These vaccine companies, they lost $137 billion in a day.
Like, yeah, but the market's at the highest it's ever been, and it's at the highest it's ever been because they've been pumping money into
that's
the.
not. I don't know how long. I don't know how long ago you looked at the market, but it is not at all.
It was the highest like a week ago, is what I'm saying.
Definitely not a week ago, dude.
No,
like,
it wasn't a week ago. It was probably like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm sorry.
Whatever, 2 or 3 weeks ago is at the highest it's ever been, is what I'm saying. It needs to level out, and everybody knows it. Everything's inflated. Tesla is not worth as much as it's, you know what I mean? Like, these companies aren't worth as much as they're invested in, as their stock prices are, because of the whatever's going on.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, like I said earlier, like I think it's going to get a little bit harder before it gets better. But ultimately, I do have faith that there is a benevolent force. Like, in a lot of these conspiracy theories, it does seem that there is a section of the United States Navy and the United States Air Force that seem like they are very diligently like a white hat kind of group of people that are trying to correct what's going on in the government and in the world, but we're talking about going up against people that have so much wealth and power that they're almost untouchable, right? Like they have become a god through mammon, like through the money. They have become like a type of demigod in our civilization, even though they possess no supernatural abilities. Money itself has escalated what their capabilities are to a degree that is very few people can rival, and even those who want to rival it, unless they too are powerful people, there's not a lot of things that we can do about it.
I just want to point out the Dow in 2017 was at 20,000, and today it's at 34,000. So it's way higher than it's been in the last 10 years. So like it's not a crash, but it is definitely. I mean, and if you look at the 5-year, it's just like a minor blip. Like it's.
I don't know. Every stock right now is down like fucking.
Yeah, everything it does that, dude. That's what I'm saying. You have to look at historicals with that kind of stuff.
Well, I know, but a market crash is defined as what is it, like 10% or something like that?
When it goes way, way down.
I think this is classified as a crash already. If I'm correct.
And we're moving in. We're gonna with that crash too, right? It's gonna affect everything and everyone, every business, every company worldwide, and ultimately we're gonna go into a recession. And then if hopefully if we play our cards right, or not us, but the powers that be, the people in control of the systems and the money, if they play their cards right, we will avoid depression, and somebody's gonna come out of it looking like the heroes. As a result of whatever systems they decide to implement. But no matter where we're at right now, we are going to head into a high inflation, low money depression. This is
Sell-offs happen when interest rates are raised and they try to curb inflation. So this is what's going on right now. So like I just posted the last 1 year on there, and like if you look at the graph, like we're not anywhere near any kind of crash right now. So I mean, there's potential for it to level out. All kinds of things can happen. China could be buying more bond. We don't know. China has $3 trillion in our assets. All kinds of stuff could be going on. I'd have to do some research on it, but I'll talk to my dad. He was a financial advisor and he worked for Goldman Sachs, in the '80s. But I'll try and see what he has to say. I don't know if he follows it much these days.
Yeah, and I feel like that's your part, right? Like we all do our part in collecting information, spreading information, helping other people, showing other people like the solutions to their questions.
Yeah, but I just don't give a shit anymore, like you did, like you were saying earlier. Like I just don't give a shit anymore. Like let it fucking all burn at this point.
I think we all feel that. I think we're all kind of gassed out a little bit.
I just have one more question I want to get through, and then we'll start wrapping it up. But have you heard about, and do you have thoughts on the solar flash narrative, like that there's going to be some kind of big pulse from a star or something?
That is the one aspect of Corey Goode's testimony that I actually built a lot of my ascension beliefs on. And I do really hope that, that is true, because the ramifications of it can go two ways, right? Either a solar flash, like a coronal mass ejection that's so big that it sends like a big wave of plasma through through the earth and through us, is going to do one of two things, right? It's either going to completely destroy us, or it's going to change matter itself on a fundamental level. Like something like that would emit waves of radiation and just like energies that we have never encountered in ever, probably, at least that we know of. And how it changes, like one thing that it would probably do technologically, it'll wipe out all technology. So if there are negative extraterrestrial technologies, like some conspiracy theories talk about, like on the moon, or let's say there's like these ships, David Wilcock talked about in one of his intel reports, there's like these ships that like hang out in like orbit around the earth that like emit these like resonance blocking technology that essentially makes it so that our reality is locked in like this kind of like fixed state. a solar flash would wipe out everything. All these technologies would become inoperable. If there was like some sort of like sentient AI thing, it would be gone. Things like these insiders talk about like nanites, these like nano little micro robot things that like control people. All of that would be gone. We would pretty much be put back to our original state, but we would have no power, we would have no technology, and we'd kind of just be right back to sticks and stones. And guns. We'd have guns for a while too.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments they wanted to get in on these topics?
I have one more thing. Like the other side of the solar flash narrative is that it causes some sort of ascension level event where matter itself, from all of the charged particles and neutrinos, essentially it like reorders them into a different density or state, which could then, in essence, something like that would change us on like a molecular level and could yield maybe supernatural abilities, which is basically what the foundation of, you know, the New Age ascension narrative is. That somehow our DNA will evolve in some way, and the solar flash and that energy that comes from the sun could be the catalyst for that change. It could cause like almost like a global transfiguration, right? Like just like Jesus and Moses went through like the transfiguration, it would cause it for all of us simultaneously at the same time, or at least everybody who's prepared for it and isn't going to burst into flames.
Something like a rapture type event, perhaps.
Yeah, but like less beams of us going to the sky and all of us just exploding into balls of light, and then hopefully stabilizing enough that the light body doesn't just destroy itself in that change.
Wow. Well, this has all been really fascinating. I think we covered an awful lot of great material, but it's also been a relatively long recording. So I think we should wrap it up now, and hopefully we'll make this a new format. We'll just call them open discussions or whatever. Video open discussion events where everyone goes on video and we can talk about a whole bunch of different subjects with everybody instead of necessarily having one guest, although this time Krimson really was the guest. But still, we'll do more video stuff in the future because it's fun and people like that. And that was a great conversation. So thanks everybody for your contributions, your questions, and your attendance and participation. Please make sure you join the Temple Mount Discord server, and on the Temple Mount, make sure you've liked and followed and subscribed to our Temple Mount SoundCloud and Temple Mount YouTube channels, which you can find there. That being said, thanks everybody, and God bless. Let's jump up to or down to, as it may be, the Templar's Tavern, and we'll hang out the rest of the night. I'll see you guys down there. Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.